Ons bied aan
We present Women's Forum with Annemarie Muller.
Vrouwenjournaal met Annemarie Muller.
Good morning, goeiemôre en welkom by hierdie heel laaste uitgawe van Vrouwenjournaal. Well, this being the final edition of Women's Forum, we concentrate mainly on reminiscences, nostalgia and goodbyes. And looking back are, among others, Peter Merrill, Yolande Dotman, Patricia Robinson, Timothy Bungay and Stephen Grenfell. But first of all, Beryl Salt rounds off her weekly feature, South African People and Places, with a final tribute to Lady Florence Dixie.
Following her travels through Zululand and her stay with Bishop Colenso in Maritzburg, Lady Florence Dixie threw herself wholeheartedly into the fight to have King Cetshwayo reinstated. From Durban, she travelled by sea to Cape Town, where she had a second meeting with the imprisoned king. As she had promised, she brought him a message from his people. "I am come, Cetshwayo, to tell you that I have just returned from Zululand. I thought it might please you to receive news of your country, and I am here to answer any questions I can, which you may desire to put to me." She told him that his people wished him to return. He replied, "All I love is in Zululand. My heart is there, where lies my father's grave. I am heartsick and weary with waiting. When will England be just and let me return?" She promised to do whatever she could to further his cause. Lady Florence and her husband returned to England, but Africa was certainly not forgotten. Florence had written a great many colourful and moving articles about Africa, and in particular about the Zulus and Zululand. And in England she found herself in the forefront of the battle to achieve the king's return. Together with others of the king's supporters, she lobbied MPs, wrote letters to the newspapers, had articles published. Her activity not only kept the whole subject in the news, but it also kept up the flagging spirits of Cetshwayo in his distant confinement. Of course, she brought down upon herself a flood of criticism, which ranged from derision to culpable libel, but she allowed the outcry to wash over her. When news of the possibility of renewed fighting in Zululand reached Britain, she announced grandly that she had dispatched a special messenger to stop the rising. The Natal Mercury gasped. "Lady Florence once more enters the arena and puts forward pretensions that almost take one's breath away." Indeed, she was perhaps overplaying her hand, but her tactics paid off. At the beginning of July, it was announced that Cetshwayo was to be allowed to visit England. It seemed that with trouble looming in Egypt, Britain wished to do her best to ensure peace in southern Africa. No doubt Lady Florence's enemies, and possibly her friends as well, expected her to rush publicly to the king's side and act as bear leader. In fact, she retired to the country. No one could understand it. But Florence was intelligent enough to see that she could do no more to help the king. To make herself conspicuous now would be to harm his cause. She was determined to stay firmly in the background. Cetshwayo, dogged by reporters and crowds of curious sightseers, was received by the Prince and Princess of Wales and by Queen Victoria at Osborne. He had meetings at the Colonial Office, and as a result of these meetings, it was announced that he was to be allowed to return to Zululand, provided that he disbanded the Zulu army, agreed to accept British advisers, and observed the boundaries laid down by the British authorities. He was also requested to agree that part of his country be allocated to those Zulus who did not wish to live under his rule. This clause he refused at first to accept, but was persuaded later to agree to it. This was to lead to much trouble in the future. When she heard the news, Florence's pleasure at the king's return to his people was mixed with unhappiness at the division of his country. However, she accepted that her fight for Cetshwayo was finished. "I can now," she wrote, lay down my pen. Its services are no longer required for this subject. If to my poor advocacy Cetshwayo is in the smallest manner indebted for his liberty, I do not grudge the time or trouble expended. So her crusade for the return of the Zulu king ended, but many others were to lie ahead. One of them, her fight on behalf of Home Rule for Ireland, led her into even deeper trouble, and was possibly responsible for a violent attack upon her person. She was also an early advocate of sex equality and women's rights, demanding that professions and occupations be open to women, and doing what she could to achieve revisions in the marriage and divorce laws. She also both practiced and preached dress reform for women. She died at the comparatively early age of 50 at Glen Stewart Annan in Scotland. Almost half a century after her death, a monument was raised on the site of Cetshwayo's old kraal at Ulindi, a monument which paid tribute to the fallen of both sides in the Zulu War. And with this small tribute to a courageous and passionate lady, I end my contributions to Women's Forum. My thanks to Anna-Marie for allowing me to contribute to her always excellent magazine, and to you, our listeners, for your support and interest.
Well, thank you to you, Beryl Salt, for opening up new horizons for us in this feature on South African people and places. It's been quite an education. In rounding off his feature series, People of Our 20th Century, Brian Rose today appropriately salutes a great son of South Africa, Lawrence van der Post.
It's extraordinary that our beleaguered and often battered country produces so many notable sons. And in the Forum, perhaps I should hastily add, and daughters too. Of all those who are known and loved internationally, perhaps it would be a happy way of ending this series by a brief salute to Sir Lawrence van der Post. And one says that because the old savant, although an untiring critic of apartheid, has always been an optimist about South Africa. Born in 1906 in the Orange Free State, of a Dutch father and a Huguenot mother, his family fought through the Boer War. He had a nurse who was of Bushman stock, which many of you will see as pointing to his later fascinating work and writing about the little people. He had 14 brothers and sisters. The boys were taught by their parents to ride, shoot straight, and speak the truth. Not at all a bad beginning. He grew up to discover a great affinity for the clinical psychologist Jung, with whose drift towards mysticism he was entirely in sympathy. He worked as a Durban reporter, a job that was a little later to take him to Japan, where he quickly learned Japanese. He founded one of the very early English literary magazines in South Africa called Voorslag, with Roy Campbell. Well, that lasted for 3 issues. Colonel van der Post had a distinguished and interesting war career. He joined Lord Mountbatten to try to sort out the war-ravished Far East. You may recall one of the great war books that arose from this particular time, A Bar of Shadow. And perhaps Venture into the Interior is best known of all his books to South African readers, with its story of the Kalahari Desert and its Bushman inhabitants. What matters, said van der Post, is wholeness. The individual should seek a broadening awareness while never shirking the duty to do right in public affairs. But despite the influence of Jung, van der Post is no mystic, even though in Flamingo Feather in 1955 he foresaw that Russia would exploit black grievances in southern Africa through surrogates. He knew and to an extent understood Russia, having travelled there during one of his occasional thaws. He saw an emergent humanity in South African today. godfather to Prince William and a friend of Mrs. Margaret Thatcher, he's one of the great conservationists of our time. And here in saying Ave Varlequae, one recalls what the old bushman once said to him. There's a dream dreaming us. And so we say tot ziens to Anna Marie and Kevin Mann, who teamed up so cheerfully with us all, who were making our small contributions, and a Freystart call for Sir Lawrence. May 1986 be happier.
And with this fitting tribute to a great man of our 20th century, Brian Rose takes his leave of us, a man all of us on Women's Forum greatly admire. And now, Cheeseborough Ponds, manufacturers of the pure white Vaseline, present the final edition of our child and baby care featurette, You and Your Baby.
Once upon a time, there was an experienced mum, a new mum, and a soon-to-be mum.
Can anything prevent my baby from getting nappy rash?
Asked new mum.
And mine?
Echoed soon-to-be mum.
Yes,
Replied experienced mum.
Vaseline White Petroleum Jelly helps prevent nappy rash by acting as a waterproof barrier between baby's delicate skin and a wet nappy.
Vaseline, the pure white petroleum jelly. Tried and trusted for over 100 years. And that's no fairy tale.
Hello, this is Marina Petropoulos with the last of our questions and answers on pregnancy and childcare. The first letter is from Michelle Kruger of Sunnyside, who says, My son is 11 months old, and ever since he had a middle ear infection, he's become a very restless sleeper. The infection seems to have cleared completely, but his restlessness at night has got worse. He tosses and turns, and every time I check up on him, he has a different position, usually at the other end of the cot. What worries me the most is that throughout the night he just pulls himself up into a standing position and cries. I have to pick him up, rock him a little, and put him down to sleep again. Is it possible that his ears are still worrying him, or is there perhaps something else that's the matter? Mrs. Kruger, there are many possible reasons why a child wakes at night or is restless. Some of these are wind, pain, hunger, cold, or worms. And also, he may just be a naturally restless sleeper. However, ear infections are a common cause of restlessness, especially when the child lies down due to the pressure this causes. Your son may have accumulated fluid behind his eardrum since the infection, and it's advisable to take him to your doctor for another examination so that his ears can be checked again. And now we move to Stellenbosch and this letter from Magda Verwey, who says, I'm expecting my second baby and I'm still breastfeeding my son of 18 months. I'd like to know if it's harmful to breastfeed during pregnancy. If it is, please advise me of a method to discontinue breastfeeding. I also feel so worn out, and I think it's due to the fact that I'm still breastfeeding. Mrs. Verwey, it's not harmful to breastfeed while you're pregnant, but it does place an extra burden on your body, and it's not surprising that you feel tired. It won't be easy to stop your son from demanding feeds, but you'll have to be firm, though loving. Try and cut down on the number of feeds he has by telling him there's no milk and distracting him with a game or with something else to drink or eat instead. As your pregnancy advances, you need to allow your body to produce colostrum for your new baby, and this is different to the mature breast milk which you're producing now, so you should make an effort to wean him as soon as possible. I presume your doctor has prescribed a vitamin supplement for you. If not, ask him for one to help meet the demands made on your body. Our next letter is from a listener who doesn't want her name mentioned, and she lives in Vanderbijl Park, and she says, I have an 8-year-old son who has the irritating habit of grinding his teeth in his sleep. Is it due to a lack of something in his diet? I also have a 10-year-old daughter, and both my son and daughter have bandy legs. I took them to the hospital and they told me that I must forget about their crooked legs, but it really is worrying me. Grinding teeth is not due to worms or a lack in the diet. You'll just have to live with it. There's also very little that can be done for bandy legs at your children's ages. They may have had a vitamin deficiency in infancy, so see that they get plenty of milk and cheese now so that they at least get sufficient calcium and vitamin D at this stage. It's a final goodbye from me, Marina Petropoulos, and a very big thank you to all the listeners who've shared their childcare and pregnancy queries. Thank you too for all your friendly letters and kind words. I hope that the new year will bring you and your children health, peace and prosperity. Goodbye.
And I'm sure all our mothers join with me in saying thank you, Marina, for a splendid mother, child and baby care featurette. You and Your Baby was brought to you with the compliments of Cheeseborough Ponds, manufacturers of the pure white Vaseline. Here now, to round off the Springbok radio story, is Peter Merrill from The Outside Looking In.
In the mid-60s, rising operating costs and money needed for further expansion decided the SABC to make application to Parliament for further commercial stations to be opened. This was granted, and the so-called regional services were introduced. They were Radio Highveld, Radio Good Hope, and Radio Port Natal. So as not to compete directly with Springbok Radio, their pattern was designed as middle-of-the-road music stations. Television was about 10 years off, but the addition in home entertainment permitted listeners to tune away from Springbok when they wanted to listen to music only. True, sponsors were happy to buy more radio time, but the listener cake for all the stations was still the same size as it had been. Perhaps the younger generation listened to the regional stations, but the music was too mild for the pop enthusiasts. Then came the SABC takeover of LM Radio. With the coming of independence in Mozambique, SABC found itself saddled with an unexpected extra commercial station, which refused to be killed. It was the pop station the kids had been waiting for. It broadcast on medium wave only, and it was the 5th commercial station in the SABC stable, so it was named Radio 5. There was no panic, however. Springbok was still the favourite in all homes, and its listener rating continued to grow as the younger generation became mums and dads, leaving the pure pop scene behind them. But the signs were there for all to see. Overseas radio stations threatened by television had found a successful pattern which kept them not only alive but actually gaining audiences once more. The ingredient was music, especially popular music. The record and music business throughout the Western world was growing at a breakneck pace, and radio was the medium used to promote it. In 1969, I saw the writing on the wall for the private production houses. I had, for some time during the early 60s, developed another side to my company's activities. We created and expanded an active documentary and training film production division. In addition, I experimented with monochrome TV equipment and made a number of television training videotapes. There was much talk about the introduction of television for some time in the mid-70s in South Africa. It didn't take much to study patterns in the other parts of the world to realize radio would have to change radically if it were to survive the TV onslaught. I was made an offer by a large electronics company in Johannesburg to take charge of their closed-circuit TV subsidiary, and decided to accept the offer. Sound and Film Services was sold as a going concern, and I removed myself from the radio production house business after 22 years. Having experienced all I wanted in the closed-circuit TV field, especially as a powerful training and teaching medium, I returned to Springbok Radio, this time in the employ of the SABC. As senior producer, I was able to bring to the Springbok audiences more big and small shows. The Generation Game with Clark McKay proved to be popular, as were a number of serials and plays for which I was responsible. In 1976, television was launched in South Africa. It was an instant success. A picture-starved country sat glued to the goggle box from start of transmission to close down. If it moves, they'll watch it, someone said. He was right to an extent. They even watched when it didn't move. The test pattern was switched on in many homes even before the programs began. And it was watched. Nearly 2 generations of South Africans have enjoyed the personal, intimate and friendly style of their favourite station over a period of nearly 36 years. The general knowledge of tens of thousands of children and adults has been broadened by the entertaining manner in which little-known facts were disseminated over the air. The private production house industry will have to close its doors or adapt to a far more capital-intensive TV production operation. The question I will always ask myself is, was it really necessary to kill the Springbok, or could it have been saved a long time ago?
Well, for the moment, that question remains unanswered. And that was Peter Merrill, who is presently in charge of the English service of the Southwest African Broadcasting Corporation in Windhoek. And Peter was looking in from the outside on the Springbok Radio Story. Ons nooi u ook vanoggend om te luister na die slotaanbieding van Lisa Kap se reeks praatjies oor die onthaalkuns en ek stel graag vir Martilie aan die woord.
As 'n mens na 'n goed gedekte tafel kyk en die kos is op so 'n wyse voorgesit dat dit sommer al klaar lyk of dit lekker kan wees, en daar is in die kosversiering sorg gedra dat elke dis op sy beste vertoon, dan wil 'n mens sommer al klaar aansit. Suurlemoene is letterlik, soos die advertensies sê, almal se vriend. Jy kan dit feitelik op oneindige maniere inspan met kosversiering om te sorg dat die helder geel kleur nie verlore gaan nie en dat die besonderse ronde vorm op sy beste lyk. Ten eerste is daar al die vorms waarin jy die skyfie kan sny. Die skoenlappervorm, die kruisvorm. Suurlemoenkrulle kan gemaak word deur halwe skyfies te draai, in koue yswater te laat staan of doop en droog te laat word. Skyfies kan ook opgerol word en met 'n bandjie van rooi pimento vasgehou word. Suurlemoenmandjies kan ook geskep word deur die suurlemoen in die helfte te sny en dan die rand te knip in 'n getande patroontjie. Suurlemoenrande kan met 'n patroonsnyer ook uitgesny word, sodat elke skyfie se rand apart patroon het. Sny nou so 'n skyfie in die helfte en gebruik dit om snoepgoed op te sit, soos bo op die suurlemoen 'n skyfie agurkie met 'n stukkie rooi russie bo op die agurkie. Skyfie suurlemoen by vis lyk ook goed as die skille die patroon op het en dit onderste bo tussen die visse se sterte op die visopskepbord geplaas word. Ansjovissies is altyd 'n gewilde manier om enige ander vorm van garnering soos 'n snykomkommer mee op te kikker. Rol die vissies op en plaas dit op 'n snytjie Franse brood waarop 'n smeer van hoendermayonaise is. Gebruik dit ook om 'n lyfie in toe te draai en op die kraakbeskuitjie te plaas. Ansjovissies leen hulle tot buffet snoepgoed. Stokkieskos is 'n aantreklike manier om lewe aan enige skemerkelkbuffet te gee as snoepgoed, maar het ook 'n plek as garnering op die meer formele tafel waar dit byvoorbeeld in 'n hoender, tong of ham gedruk kan word. Kies hier liewer die meer ongewone kombinasies op 'n stokkie, soos byvoorbeeld 'n olyf, 'n artisjokhart en 'n verglansde kersie. Al 3 tipe olywe word in garnering gebruik, die groen, swart en gestopte olywe. Swart olywe se wonderlike donker kleur kan oral ingespan word, waar so 'n donker kleur kort. Albei die groen en swart olywe kan gesny word om blomblaartjies en baie ander vormpies te vorm. Gebruik byvoorbeeld 'n rooi russie as die blommiddel en rangskik gesnyde swart olyfskyfies as blare. Gestopte olywe met rooi vulsels van pimento kan 'n pragtige randpatroon vorm as dit met eiergras vir steeltjies gekombineer word en swart olywe as blaartjies aangeheg word. Nog 'n gedagte is om op 'n plat bord met 'n petersilierand garnaaltjies te rangskik, wat letterlik stert aan kop met mekaar lê, en die openinge tussen hul sterte en koppe te vul met 'n olyf. Kosversiering is ook nie kosversiering as daar nie iewers in jou versiering 'n tamatieroos is nie. Maak 'n tamatieroos so. Neem 'n skerp mes en verwyder 'n 2,5 cm reepie vel al rondom die tamatie. Verwyder ook 'n klein gedeelte van die vleis soos wat jy skil. Moet nie mooi sny nie, maar gebruik eerder so 'n ligte saagaksie, sodat die kante kartelerig is. Neem nou hierdie geskilde gedeelte en draai dit platterig op, sodat dit 'n roos vorm. Plaas jou roosie op 2 stukkies bronkorslaai, sodat dit die groen agtergrond vorm. Hardgekookte eiers is maklik om voor te berei en te garneer, nie net vir 'n bord vir snoepgeregte by 'n skemerkerk onthaal nie, maar kan op jou dineettafel gebruik word as randpatroon by groentegeregte sonder proteïene. Voorsien die eier van die volgende interessante vulsels. Maak sardientjies, eiergras, sout en peper en bietjie mayonnaise saam fyn en vul die holte wat die eiergeel gelos het daarmee. Strooi met 'n bietjie paprika. Salm en 'n bietjie mosterd met 'n bietjie mayonnaise gemeng. In al die gevalle kan jy met 'n klein selerijblaartjie of deurgesnyde olyf garneer.
En met die goeie raad en wenke kom ons aan die einde van Lisa Kapp se reeks praatjies oor die onthaalkuns. Die reeks is aangebied deur Martie Lee, wat ook al 'n lang pad saam met Vrouejoernaal geloop het. Our erstwhile producer Timothy Bangi now takes a nostalgic look at his life and times with Springbok Radio over the past 19 years.
Remember that pulsating theme? General Motors on Safari. That was my first assignment when I arrived here from Kenya in 1965, spending a couple of months every year in the bush to record wildlife sounds for the one actuality program that we broadcast each month. The others were fictional and were written by a fellow Wenwi, Michael McCabe. I might tell you that I was more at home in the real bush, being chased up trees by every conceivable form of wildlife, than I was in the concrete jungle, being chased up lampposts by Johannesburg drivers. But, one way or another, we seemed to travel much more in those days, touring the Key Game with Adrian Steed and B. Reed, spending a few weeks in Grahamstown researching programs to commemorate the 150th anniversary of the landing of the 1820 settlers, journeying to foreign parts for Time to Travel, which I first produced some 18 years ago. But these jaunts were interspersed with long bouts at the typewriter or in the studio, writing and producing comedy programs such as The Trouble with George, news features like Deadline Thursday Night, panel games, you remember Wild Words and the Generation Game, documentaries, The Broken Link and Only Man is Vile, not to mention plays and serials. Max Headley, Special Agent. And what fun I had with that series. It ran for 2 years and boasted 3 Max Headleys. The first was Tony J, with a deep, resonant voice. He was offered a filming contract on location, so I replaced him with Brian O'Shaughnessy, who has a much lighter voice. So I hit upon the idea of having Headley beaten up, kicked in various vital places, and emerging after a week of mumbling behind bandages in hospital with a voice of a slightly higher pitch. But all those programs had their excitements, their pleasures. Interviewing drug addicts and pushers for Society and the follow-up to The Broken Link. Dennis Smith, McCabe and myself sitting in the office, trying to dream up comic situations for The Trouble with George. The Adventures of a New South African. We all were at that time, in a program based not so loosely on the life and disastrous times of McCabe himself. The adrenaline-charged Deadline Thursday Night, when, at the beginning, it seemed that the fates were on our side because everything happened on a Thursday. Coup d'etats, assassinations, invasions, you name it, it happened on Thursday. On one occasion, the format was changed continuously from the moment we started putting the program together until a last-minute phone call came in from Israel. The tapes went into the studio in sections, and we ended up finishing the program live with Adrian Steed in the studio signing off. Uri Geller was another highlight, and that was live. He sat in the studio with Adrian, who made the mistake of handing over his car keys, and then sat mesmerized, as we all were, when Uri Geller proceeded to focus on one key, and we watched it slowly bending. Adrian had to get a lift home that night. We opened up the studio telephones after that particular edition of Deadline, and people phoned in from all over the country. Geller managed to bend kitchen cutlery by proxy. He warned everyone not to experiment with their best silver, and start clocks that had long since given up the ghost. Another highlight for me was taking over 100,000 to go, after Dougie Laws vanished from the scene, literally overnight. That was a challenge, as much for me as the question master, and I actually set the questions too, as it was for the contestants, many of whom became not only friends, but contributors to programs like this one. Mary Mitchell, whose talks you must have heard, emerged triumphantly after a long question-and-answer session on Queen Mary of Teck. Inez Trimble, one of our regular contributors, chose as her subject Judy Garland, and named the converted synagogue she bought with the prize money Oz, after the Wizard of. Those were the days when we were still in Commissioner Street, and we commanded large audiences for shows like The Generation Game, Wild Words, Hotline, and 100,000 to go. We were still in the old building when I became involved with Women's Forum, a tentative half-hour experiment after Nan Fletcher retired, and Elwyn Morris took over the program. And when Elwyn herself retired from the full-time staff, I met Anna-Marie Muller for the first time. I hope you'll agree that it's been a fruitful partnership. I've certainly enjoyed working with Anna-Marie all these years. It is probably the one program that I shall not be remembered for. Plays and serials, possibly. General Motors on Safari, definitely. 100,000 to go, probably. But, in fact, the program with which I have been most involved is Women's Forum. I'm not complaining. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed writing travel programs and conducting interviews and writing humorous pieces for the program, but most of all, I enjoyed working with Anna-Marie. My salutations both to her and Kevin Mann, and to all those who contributed, and to all those who listened. We hope you have enjoyed it as much as we have. This is the last time I shall greet you, and the last time I shall utter the words, "Back to you, Anna-Marie Muller."
And the last time that I shall utter the words, "Thank you, Timothy Bungay." And from Johannesburg to Durban, where another dear friend and colleague, Yolande Dotman, awaits us with some recollections of her time with Springbok Radio.
My first recollection of working on Springbok Radio when it began in 1950 was acting in the first morning serial, which was produced in Durban and sponsored by an international soap manufacturer. Its title now seems very apt, Brave Voyage, as we actors and Springbok embarked on a voyage which has lasted 35 years. The serial opened a whole new world to us. The scripts came from Canada, 500 of them, and we had to record quickly to ensure that the same actors were available for the 2-year run. There could be no rewrites to accommodate sickness or someone moving away, so we recorded 8 episodes a day, 5 days a week, for 3 months. It was all done on disc, which meant if an actor made a mistake, there was no wiping out and repeating as we do now on tapes. We had to start a new disc. We worked very hard and got very tired, but it was a thrilling experience. Now, I remember with great affection colleagues like Merle Wayne, Ian Brett, Christina Gregg, Joan Brickhill, my co-star Tom Meehan, and of course our producer Cedric Messina. A few years later, I was again to have a close association with Tom Meehan when he played the Saint in the Leslie Charteris series I produced for 5 years. Before joining a large advertising agency in 1957, I worked with a production house, where I had the pleasure of meeting Henry Diffenthal, their very able technical director. Henry and I have remained friends and colleagues over the years, doing serials, dossiers, and bestsellers together, and these memories of my association with Springbok Radio are being recorded in his studios. And so we come to 1957, and a 6-year stint as radio manager with an exciting agency which had branches throughout the world. Lux Radio Theatre and the very popular 21 were 2 of the programs which occupied a lot of my time. When I joined the agency, the majority of the plays came from Australia, but each year the birthday production was done locally. And this was always a great event with a studio audience and the champagne party to follow. And we usually broadcast the play live, and that could be a hair-raising experience. 21 was exciting and interesting, as I flew to Johannesburg each week to make sure that our sponsors got what they wanted. I was fortunate in 1960, when my husband Tim and I were on holiday overseas, to spend a week with the parent company of our agency in London. There was no commercial radio in England then, so their television department was fascinated to hear about our Springbok Radio, the programs and the commercials. Jingles in commercials were becoming what we would now call the in thing, and I had the opportunity of arranging and attending a recording of what became a very popular jingle for our South African clients, which was recorded by the Johnson brothers, then regarded as the #1 jingle team in England. It was during my first years at the agency that From Crystal with Love took the air, and I began my long association with that prolific writer Delphine Lethbridge. For 8 years, Delphine made Crystal a way of life. I remember a lunch I had with the producer, Humphrey Gilbert. He drew my attention to 2 women at a table nearby who were obviously talking about us. I didn't know them, but as we walked out, one of them caught my hand and inquired anxiously, "How is Amanda? Is she better?" Amanda was Crystal's small daughter, who had been ill. Agency life came to an end for me in the late 60s, when most of them moved to Johannesburg, and so from then on I freelanced acting and producing. And among productions were many written by Delphine. Best remembered, I think, a morning serial, Love is Tomorrow. Wonderful material for the considerable talents of Maureen Adair and the late Dacia Chalsty and David Horner. I began this handful of memories by telling you of my first serial, Brave Voyage. I'll always remember the daily opening. This is the story of Helen Manning, who, in spite of heavy responsibilities and bitter disappointments, lives a rich, meaningful life. Well, I was Helen Manning, and if I don't really feel I've had too many heavy responsibilities or bitter disappointments, I do feel I've had a rich, well, not necessarily money-wise, meaningful life broadcasting on Springbok Radio, and my sincere hope is that I brought some happiness to its listeners over the 35 years of its life.
Well, I and thousands of others can vouch for that. That was the unforgettable Crystal, Yolan Dotman in Durban, and may you enjoy many more years of broadcasting, dear Yo. We felt that Stephen Grenfell, who's been a regular contributor to Women's Forum for many years, ought to be in our last edition, and here he is.
Hello, dear listeners, for the last time from this particular studio. In the past, I've often thought about Women's Forum as something that it's good to have been in the past, if you get me, and that it would go on forever, as it were, like the brook. But it just didn't work out that way, did it? Here am I, still alive and comparatively viable, and able this morning to do a talk on Tibetan children and their lack of rights under their Chinese overlords, or to listen to some other Women's Forum contributor. But it just won't be there tomorrow morning at 10:45, will it? You know, that takes a bit of getting used to, and I can assure you that I'm going to miss the programme, both as a contributor and as a listener. Most of all, I think I'm going to miss dear Anna-Marie Muller and her assistant Kevin Mann, and I'm going to miss too Timothy Bunge's presence, sometimes wraith-like, but always smiling in the background. In their charming and very much younger way, these people have been like radio mothers to me over the past 10 years. Sometimes now, even now, I sit back and wonder at their patience and their invariable smiles. Anna-Marie doesn't seem to have aged one whit over the years, and Kevin is the same. I started in Women's Forum with Nan Fletcher way back, somehow missed Elwyn Morris, and have now worked on and off for Anna-Marie for a whole decade. Oh, where indeed have all those words gone? Possibly I've enjoyed the programme more as a listener than as a contributor. You see, I work at home as a freelance and almost invariably have Women's Forum on, if I'm at home, when it's on, of course. And often I record in my absence special items I want to listen to. I'm going to miss that, and there's going to be a whole hour missing every weekday morning in future. And I've enjoyed contact all these years with you, the listeners. You've been very good to me, and very good for me on occasion. So here at last is the moment of farewell. Goodbye, dear Anna-Marie. Au revoir, dear Kevin. Tot ziens, dear Timothy, if you understand what that means. Go well in all you do in the future, all of you in this very changing radio world. And farewell, dear listeners. Thank you for all your help over the years, and your attention and your interest. You too go well, while, like me, you try to fill that 1 hour void in the mid-morning of every weekday. Bless you all, and thanks.
Thank you for those kind words, Stephen. It has indeed been a pleasure working with you over the past 10 years. Last but one on our list of farewells today is our beloved Jane Eliza Hastad, who today, from her mountainside home near Simonstown, is asking for help.
Yes, good morning and goodbye, Anna-Marie. Not goodbye, not for any of us, but a lost occasion. And I do want help. In the last few months, 3 of us have gone to our long home. For man goeth to his long home, and the mourners go about in the streets. Not that one can see much to mourn about in a Christian going to his father. But in the leaflet for one of the Thanksgiving services for the life lived, there was a piece which said it all, bang on. But they gave no acknowledgement. If anyone knows where it comes from, please tell Anna-Marie. We shall be in touch. Listen, I'm going to read now. Death is nothing at all. I have only slipped away into the next room. I am I and you are you. Whatever we were to each other, that we are still. Call me by my old familiar name. Speak to me in the easy way which you always used. Put no difference into your tone. Wear no forced air of solemnity or sorrow. Laugh as we always laughed at the little jokes we enjoyed together. Play, smile, think of me, pray for me. Let my name be ever the household word it always was. Let it be spoken without effort, without the ghost of a shadow on it. I'm sorry, honey pies, if I sound a little damp. Let us blow the aged nose and continue. There's not a lot more. Life means all that it ever meant. It's the same as it ever was. There's absolutely unbroken continuity. What is this life but a negligible accident? Why should I be out of mind because I'm out of sight? I'm but waiting for you for an interval, somewhere very near, just around the corner. All is well. There. Now, who wrote that and where does it come from? Someone once called poetry the best words in the best order. There's nothing stays so deeply with us as memorable words. One of the great arguments, if you happen to belong to the Anglican Church, for sticking to the 1662 Book of Common Prayer and the authorized version of the Bible, is their moving memorability. Phrases that have shifted into daily language. A while gone by, I was with folk who played an LP of Winston Churchill's wartime speeches. Cadence by cadence, we heard them as they came rolling out when the skies were falling, and our men were in there too. So now it's the rather sad moment of thank you and hail and farewell. Or, to go to another poet, Lord Tennyson, when King Arthur was passing, the old order changeth, yielding place to new, and God fulfills himself in many ways, lest one good custom should corrupt the world. Even a good groove is a bad place to get stuck, because getting stuck is bad. Likely enough we shall all get together again. Listeners still a vital part of the team, still its very essence. Maybe it'll be over some even more exciting program. Until then, everyone here and everyone there, Anna-Marie, thank you, and tot ziens. God bless and keep us all.
Well, what more can I say but a sincere thank you on behalf of us all to Jane Eliza Hastad for her entertainment over the years, and a lesson in life we will never forget. We leave Jane Eliza Hastad at her mountainside home near Simonstown, and from one grand lady to another, Patricia Robinson fades the footlights on Women's Forum.
For hundreds of people throughout South Africa, today is a sad day indeed, as Women's Forum comes on the air for the last time. For many of us, men and women, who have listened with pleasure and appreciation to this varied and widely diverse program, the shutting down of Women's Forum will seem like losing a close personal friend. Since it started about 20 years ago, this program has made friends with South Africa, coming into homes in towns, cities and villages, always bringing us something of interest, something worth listening to. Older listeners may remember the early names connected with Women's Forum: Julie Glenn, Nan Fletcher, Elwyn Morris, and in those days the program was presented only in English. Heading the program today is the producer Anna-Marie Muller, the velvet-voiced presenter, who for the last 10 years has introduced the program each day, and whose impeccable Afrikaans and English has been a joy to listeners all these years. She it is who, ably assisted by Kevin Mann, finds all the material. I was thinking yesterday of what it must have meant to produce this program 6 days a week, 12 months of the year, for all these years. I worked it out on my little calculator, and that means more than 6,000 programs, and with an average of, say, 10 different items in each program, a staggering 60,000 items have been thought up, sought out, interviewed, recorded, linked together, and broadcast. What a mammoth job, and never a foot wrong. Never a complaint or disagreement from contributors or listeners or advertisers. You and I, we switch on our radios, tune into Women's Forum, and sit back and listen and enjoy. I'm sure hardly any of us gives a thought to all the work and planning behind the program, finding the items of interest, most of them extremely topical too, interviewing the people concerned, some of them in Johannesburg, where Women's Forum goes on the air, but many in different parts of South Africa, and some even in other parts of the world. And over the years, Women's Forum has opened the door for us into a wider world. A world of interest and entertainment, of wisdom, of laughter. But that door is closing behind us today. It will be so greatly missed by you and by me, by all those thousands of listeners who looked forward to it so eagerly each day. So, wherever you are, let us join in saying a heartfelt thank you to the producers of Women's Forum, and especially to Anna-Marie Muller, who has given us this wonderful program every day. Perhaps it will come back to us in some other form. Let us hope so. And if it does, it can be assured of a warm welcome from all of us, all over South Africa.
Well, thank you, Patricia, for those kind words. And now I would like to pay tribute to you and to all of our Women's Forum contributors over the last 10 years. Without you, this program would not have been possible. And a special salute to our dear listeners who have made it all so very worthwhile. I shall never forget you. And last of all, to a much valued friend and colleague, without whose help, dedication and devotion, this magazine would not have run so smoothly, Kevin Mann. Thank you, dear Kev. Totsiens aan die almal, en gesondheid, liefde en vrede is die mooiste wat ek kan toewens. From me, Anna-Marie Muller, goodbye, along with Kenneth McKellar.
Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? Should old acquaintance be forgot and days lang syne? For auld lang syne, my dear, for auld lang syne, we'll tak a cup o' kindness yet for Auld Lang Syne. We twa herein about the braes and pulled the gowans fine, but we've wandered many a weary fit sin Auld Lang Syne. For Auld Lang Syne, my dear, for Auld Lang Syne, we'll take a cup o' kindness yet for Auld Lang Syne. We twa hae paddled in the burn frae morning sun till dine, but seas atween us braid hae roared sin Auld Lang Syne. For Auld Lang Syne, my dear, for Auld Lang Syne, we'll take a cup o' kindness yet for Auld Lang Syne. And here's a hand, my trusty peer, and give a hand